Now let's get perspectives to this reoccurring incident as international affairs analyst Calvin Duck joins me from Washington, D.C. to discuss this. Good to have you as always. Another cycle of gun violence and then huge silence until another one happens again. Unfortunately, this incident may not necessarily be the last. Take El Paso, for example, one of the most peaceful places in the United States has suffered this. A metaphor of what United States has become?
Well, yes, and I think that the horrible shooting in El Paso has two elements of what we're really dealing with and not dealing with well here in the United States. The first is the proliferation of guns, because as you'll notice, when President Trump spoke yesterday and listed off who was to blame and what we could do, there was not one gun control measure mentioned because many people in this country refused to even have that discussion. The second part about the El Paso shooting was this particular shooter was from Texas but came down, I think it was 6 hours from the north, and he targeted immigrants, and that was part of his manifesto. And that's another thing that the United States is not dealing with well at all, the how to deal with our immigration challenges at the southern border. So
let me take you to that speech by Donald Trump, which you say was silent on the issue of gun control. Is gun control, gun license control, really the way out? He did put the blame on mental health, illness, and a whole lot of other things without mentioning gun control, like you rightly said.
Yes, and I think that, one of the things that opponents of gun control always say is that no law would have prevented every gun death or every mass shooting, which is true. But, we don't have that standard for everything else. We still have laws against murder and theft and other things because it will cut them down. I think that gun control is a big part of it. I think mental health is also a big part of it, but we also have to keep in mind President Donald Trump has sought to cut funding for mental health programs. He even rolled back an Obama era regulation about those who had questionable mental issues from getting guns. So you have to look at what he said, but also what he's doing.
Now, Trump's call for a bipartisan approach to the gun violence in the United States. What's your take on that?
I don't believe it's possible, and I actually don't think in this case that it is President Trump, because from his whole life and political career, the issue of guns and the Second Amendment wasn't really something that he expressed himself loudly about until he became president. There are members of Congress in the Republican Party that won't even entertain the idea that gun control might be the solution. It's interesting to note that this happened in Texas, where there are a lot of guns, and the anti-gun control groups always say that a good guy with a gun defeats a bad guy with a gun, and that didn't happen there, so why would it happen anywhere else?
And with the homeland security that was put in place after 9/11, it seems the United States has really not been able to tackle the issue of domestic gun violence. What do you think is responsible for that?
Well, I think one of the main problems is you're right, since September 11th, we've had a lot of challenges. But do you know that this is the first mass shooting where we really started to have a conversation about white supremacy and some of the racism and white nationalism that we're seeing? So part of the reason why this hasn't been addressed properly is because during past shootings, a lot of people were reluctant to say that it was because of extremism or racism. They just basically said it was the person who was mentally unstable. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't tackled it as best as we could.
Calvin Duck, international affairs analyst, thank you so much for joining me on The World Now.